Shadi ka plan, for me, it's very traditional thing. It's an arranged marriage. My mom will find somebody who she thinks that I should get married to, and then I'll say yes to that when the time comes. So abhi to फिलहाल ऐसा कोई scene है नहीं. In my family, most of our marriages are arranged, and I'm totally okay with that.
Over here, for example, the style of marriages are different. It's more love marriages, but yet the divorce rates are so high.
So high.
So it's not like they've cracked any secret code कि you know आपने try कर लिया, try before you buy, तो उसके साथ बेहतर you know experience होती है. It's actually not proven that way either. So
it's not. It's really not.
Hey, my name is Habib Ahmed, and you're listening to Popcord. In each episode of this podcast, I talk to different people from all around the world, and we all have one big connection: Pakistan. Our special guest for this episode is Bilal Junejo. Bilal previously gave a short monologue in her August 14th special episode, number 62, where he shares his love for the country. So you can listen to Bilal's full monologue in episode number 62 at 23 minutes and 35 seconds. But here I will play a 1-minute version of his monologue.
As a kid, I had this sort of identity crisis. I didn't know where I belonged. Living overseas, you always hang out with the local Indian community, the local Southern Asian community, and I tried to blend in with them, but for some reason, I was never accepted and never felt comfortable, always felt out of place. And, they look down on Pakistanis. I would hide the fact that I'm from Pakistan sometimes just to avoid all the hazing and the insults and stuff. So this went on a long time until I was watching TV one day. It was 14th August and I saw the ceremony at Wagah border. When they hoist the flag and everyone's clapping and screaming. And when I saw that, I realized that I belong to a free country. I come from a place where I will be accepted and nobody will make fun of me. That's my culture. And this is something to be proud of. It gave me a sense of belonging, and alhamdulillah, that was the day that my identity crisis ended. Alhamdulillah for this nation. I am so grateful to Allah Ta'ala that I was born in Karachi, Pakistan. It's definitely something to be proud of.
Now, Bilal is here to share a little bit about his life. Bilal has spent most of his life living in the southern region of Africa, specifically the countries of Malawi, South Africa, and Zimbabwe.
It's like a spider web kind of thing. I moved to Malawi first. I lived there until I was around 6. Then we came back to Pakistan for 2 years. I learned how to read and write Urdu in Pakistan. I grew up like a proper Karachi boy. Then I moved to Zimbabwe and I lived there for a number of years. And then my parents sent me to South Africa in the middle for 2 years. I was in a boarding school. And then recently I was in South Africa again for 2 years, alone once again. For university. So South Africa wasn't like with family. It was mostly just
education, basically.
For education purposes. And Zimbabwe and Malawi, my family actually lived there. And then we moved from Zimbabwe to Malawi. And now we're permanently there.
This is our first time bringing someone from that part of the world. So naturally, a very exciting and insightful discussion for us. He's going to talk to us about the people, the languages, the places, and the food, all from his perspective. So without further ado, let's hit it up with Bilal.
So my name is Bilal Junejo, and alhamdulillah, I was born in Karachi, Pakistan. One of the few people in my family from my generation born in Pakistan. 24 years old, studying accounting. I was born in Pakistan, but I grew up in Africa. So I'm sort of an African child as well. My parents moved to Africa when I was a year old. So that culture is also instilled in me in a way. I grew up in Malawi. Then I moved to Zimbabwe for a bit. I lived in South Africa alone for about 4 years. I was young, but alhamdulillah, it was a good experience. So that was how my childhood was, like just moving around a little bit.
I see. And what brought your parents, your family to Africa in general?
I've got a lot of relatives in Africa, people who moved 100 years ago to Africa, distant relatives. Even before the partition of Pakistan and India, some of them had moved to Africa. So when Pakistan was created, my great-grandfather left all his properties and everything back in India. He moved to Pakistan. And then some of us started moving. And then my dad was like the last one, you can say. He moved in 1997. I was a year old. And just a joint family, they have better business opportunities. In Pakistan, it's a really tough job environment, you can say. Yeah. So in Africa, you got a lot of chances.
Well, that's very interesting to hear. I think I mentioned this to you earlier too. Like, I didn't know about the going back 100-year part. But in general, when you hear about Pakistanis moving abroad, right? जब लोग बातें करते हैं, they mention, okay, they're going to the Gulf countries, or Dubai चले गए, America, of course, Europe. but not so often I hear, they went to Africa. So you're probably actually you are, I think, the first person on the podcast who has lived in African countries. So that's a very different angle.
Yeah, I guess so. And a lot of people don't know about the life in Africa. It's a great life in America, in Europe, even in the Gulf countries. Yeah, it's pretty great. But I tell you, there's no place like Africa. We have an amazing life. I can tell you something. Like our people, Asian people, we live in Africa like kings. Okay, we don't have to lift a finger. Even roti banane ke liye bhi log hote hain wahan par. It's like that. It's to that extent. जबकि यूरोप में आपको अपना काम खुद करना है. Even in the US, you got to do your own work.
Even in the US,
And even in South Africa, just putting Malawi and Zimbabwe aside, you got to do your own work. But in Malawi and Zimbabwe, you've got domestic workers, you've got chefs, you've got cooks, and they'll come and do everything for you. And it's not even that expensive. So the life in Africa is really good. Most people don't know about it. That's why they move to those big names.
So it's really laid back, kind of similar to Pakistan. I think in Pakistan, if you think about the upper middle class, most often people do pretty well. They have workers for pretty much everything. I had actually a lot of people talk about this over here in the US too. I've actually grown up in the US. I think you already know that. So I've spent most of my life here. But whenever I go back to Pakistan, I do see the lifestyle there. I see, for example, even my mom changes her mentality. मेरी अम्मी यहाँ पे सारा कुछ करती थी, लेकिन when she goes to Pakistan, she's like, कपड़े धोने वाली है, उसने कपड़े नहीं सही धोए, वो खाने पकाने वाली, मसाज वाली, मेरे घुटने दर्द कर रहे हैं. I'm like, यार आपके पाकिस्तान जाके घुटने दर्द करते रहते हैं, वो अमेरिका में तो नहीं दर्द करते. So that's kind of maybe a Western aspect of living in general. They promote kind of doing everything yourself. You mentioned South Africa is very similar to that, right?
Yes, South Africa is very similar to that in a way. If you do have domestic workers, it's really hard to afford those kind of services. But it's completely different in Zimbabwe and Malawi because the unemployment rate is very high, and the people are generally below the poverty line. So the wages are quite low. Even the minimum wage set by the government is quite low. So you get really good service for a really good rate at the same time. And then most Pakistani people, they treat their employees well. So alhamdulillah, there's never been that big of an issue. They're quite nice to us. I have to say they are. And Pakistani people do a lot of work, a lot of social work as well. And for that reason, Pakistani people are respected mostly by the indigenous people. Pakistan ke log bahut bade dil wale hote hain. They're always giving food to people and stuff. So that way, Pakistani people do have a good reputation with the indigenous people, like the Africans, the Zimbabweans, and the Malawians. With them, it's a good relationship.
Or how's the Desi population in general? You mentioned Pakistanis are very, very well respected. I'm guessing there's a decent amount of Desi population in those three countries.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of Pakistani people, a lot of Asian people, and a lot of Pakistani people in all countries. In Pakistan, you can find them anywhere in the world. Come on, now we know that now. Yeah, so a lot of Pakistani people in South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Malawi. They've got their organizations like the Pakistani community in Zimbabwe. There's the Pakistani Welfare Association in Malawi. So they're doing a lot of work. They help each other out. If any other Pakistani person is in trouble, he's got a financial issue or something that needs to be resolved. It's really cool. They've got each other's backs. It's nice to see that. Yeah. And I think even with the indigenous people, like for example in Malawi, you've got this Welcome to Islam campaign. There's a lot of campaigns going on. A lot of people are doing a lot of social work. So Pakistanis do a lot for people, mashallah.
That's great. So I asked Bilal to elaborate more on his experience dealing with locals in Malawi, Zimbabwe, and South Africa. Here, he wanted to distinguish his experience with the native African population versus the people of South Asian descent.
Yeah, okay, on our side, especially in Zimbabwe, so the African people in Zimbabwe, the Zimbabweans, the real Zimbabweans, they're very nice people. It doesn't matter if you're Indian or you're from China or you're from Pakistan or even if you're white, it doesn't matter what race you belong to, they're very nice to everybody. And I really enjoyed that. The trouble that I found was with dealing with Asian people. Okay, the area that I grew up with, the people that were around me, they weren't all Pakistani. Most of them were local Indians. Their families had moved to Africa 150 years ago, 200 years ago. and they've been living there for a long time, so they're not really into the Indian culture. They don't really know about their roots that much, and they sort of look down at people who come from India or Pakistan. I'm sure you're familiar with the term freshie, right?
Fresh off the boat.
Yeah, exactly. So they look down, especially on Pakistanis. And they apparently Pakistanis have a bad reputation, that Pakistanis are corrupt, they're thieves, they're sort of, they built this wild image of Pakistanis, like an uncontrolled wild specimen that's just running around. And it's not like that. And I think it's mostly jealousy. Here's one thing that I noticed. I once told my dad that, why is this going on? Why is it that we're always looked down on? And it's just, look, the thing is that Indian people came here 150 years ago, 200 years ago, and, they've lived a good life here, they've made their properties, and then Pakistanis came about 20 to 25 years ago. But because Pakistani people are so intelligent and they're so immensely talented that they know how to make money, Pakistani people are really good at stuff. They're really good at business, they're really good at their jobs. And alhamdulillah, people from Pakistan came to Africa, they built their big, big houses, and, houses that those people had never seen before. I mean, I'm talking about like triple-story houses, like how we have in Pakistan.
Yeah, right.
We don't think it's a big deal to see a big house like that in Pakistan, in Karachi, in Lahore. It's a very, very big deal. So there's that aspect of jealousy also, that these people have just come here 25 to 30 years ago and they've made all this money. So it's also like that. And it's one thing that I really, really struggled with, because if I spoke my language, it was something to laugh about, like for them, It's just my whole culture.
Yeah, so let's talk about language a little bit too, actually. What are the languages spoken, the primary languages spoken in each of those countries? And were they speaking English, or were they speaking the local languages of the countries, those Asians?
Okay, the Asians will always speak English. They will always speak English because their traditional Indian languages like Hindi or Urdu or, they speak, most of them are, like they speak Kutchi and stuff. Their families do. But because they grew up in Malawi, in Zimbabwe, they don't really remember those languages. They don't really speak them. They speak English only. With us Pakistanis, as we come from Pakistan, we don't really know how to speak English. That's something to be made fun of, for them. Yeah. And it's something that I did struggle with initially. I didn't know how to speak English so well when I moved. I could only speak Urdu. And then my brother and I, we sort of started this thing where we'd only speak to each other in English. I started reading a lot of books.
It's kind of like a status symbol, right? If you know English, you're a certain status. यहाँ पे भी ये होता है in the US. A lot of brown people do this to each other. In fact, it's kind of funny. I was born in Pakistan, but I moved to the US when I was 6. But because we spoke a lot of Urdu and Punjabi at home, my accent in English never really developed, completely all the time. So I would switch accents sometimes, and it would get difficult, right? So whenever I'd go out with my brown friends in university, sometimes I get made fun of. And interestingly, the funny thing is that a lot of my Pakistani and Indian friends in university, a lot of them have moved to the US after me. So it's not like they were born and raised in the US. They actually had moved after me, like several years after me. But they worked so much on their accent that I guess it was something to be proud of for them. And I was like, yeah, you guys came here after me and you're making fun of me for being a freshie, like what you said, fresh off the boat, a fob. They use the word fob a lot. Oh, you're so fobby. I think brown people in general across the countries, we have this weird superiority issue, like English is superior to everything.
I think even in Pakistan, there's a little bit of that issue. If you go to the really posh areas and maybe you're standing at Dunkin' Donuts or something and you'll see a lady and she'll be speaking in English. I remember I had this one incident where, I have a beard and I look like somebody who wouldn't really know English, how to speak English, okay? And so I'm sitting down, was it Domino's or Dunkin' Donuts? And I'm just sitting and there were these random people just talking about me in English, thinking that I don't know how to speak the language, and it was kind of funny for me. Here's the thing though, यार जब बाहर के लोग आते हैं तो हम उनका मजाक नहीं उड़ाते कि उन्हें उर्दू बोलना नहीं आती. हम लोग इंग्लिश सुन के हम इतना इम्प्रेस होते हैं, लेकिन यार आपकी ज़बान भी एक बहुत ही impressive language है. Urdu is a very vast language. I mean, our literature is on a different level, so it shouldn't be that way, but unfortunately, that's how it is.
I wouldn't be surprised if other cultures have this issue too. English is just marked as the language of success.
It's sad, really. It shouldn't be that way. Especially brown people shouldn't be doing that
to each other.
It's very, very wrong.
Right. Now, what are the local languages of those countries? Malawi, Zimbabwe, में क्या बोला जाता है?
Okay, so Zimbabwe has 2 local languages. It's Shona and Ndebele, and they're very, very complicated languages. They're amazing. They sound really cool, but these languages are so deep. They've actually also got literature and stuff. They're written in English format, but they're really deep. So I could never, ever catch on to Shona. It was quite tough. So I could understand a little bit, but I could never speak. And then went to Malawi, and then there Chichewa is spoken. Chichewa is like a really simple language. It's quite easy, and it's very, very casual. So it's very easy to understand, and I was starting to learn before I moved back to Pakistan.
Okay.
South Africa has 11 official languages.
Yeah, I knew that about South Africa. It
has a lot of languages.
A lot of official. But I know there's official languages, but then there's also the commonly spoken languages on the streets. What is that? Is it mostly English, or is it Zulu or something else?
Okay, in South Africa, you'll find people mostly they can speak English, yeah. Most of them can speak English. And then, they will communicate with each other in their languages. Like, for example, in the KwaZulu-Natal area, where you've got Durban and all those other cities, right? They'll speak Zulu. And then with different states, it's different languages, you know what I mean?
I see, yeah.
In Zimbabwe, if you speak to Zimbabwean people, they'll speak to you in English. Their English is very good. Zimbabwe is a very educated nation. They had almost 100% literacy rate.
Wow.
Yeah, it's on a different level. And then when you go to Malawi, the locals, the Malawian people can't really speak much English. Okay, there are people, yes, who can speak English, but most of the people that I have met, I'm talking about my personal experience here, they can't speak English. So if you're stuck on the road and need directions, they will try to help you out, but it'll be very difficult for you to understand because they can't speak English.
At this point, I asked Bilal to talk about places to go for those of us who are interested in traveling to some of these Southern African countries. And he gave a few tips.
Okay, so I've been to Lake Malawi, and that's like the one amazing place that Malawi has. It has a few sightseeing places, but I think the lake would be, I love going to, and that's one place that I would recommend. When it comes to Zimbabwe, I visited this place called Nyanga. It's sort of like a holiday resort in Nyanga, and it's really nice. It's quite cool. Zimbabwe has one of the 7 wonders of the world called the Victoria Falls, and I lived in Zimbabwe for like a decade, I can say, and I never ever got to see it. I would strongly recommend that please go and take a look at Victoria Falls. It's truly amazing. I've seen pictures of it. I've never actually seen it in real life. It's on my bucket list though. And South Africa has a lot of places that you've got to see. I can't even list them down right now. Cape Town is amazing. I always say this, even like on my Twitter, I always say this, that I left a piece of me in Johannesburg. I love that place. So Johannesburg is this amazing city in South Africa, and I had a really good time. So there's a lot of places to see. But in Zimbabwe, Vic Falls, hands down, the best place. I really want to see that.
The Victoria Falls, makes sense. Yeah. Africa, I think, gets overlooked the most, and yet I think it might be probably one of the most, if not the most interesting continent to check out, just because it's so huge, right? It has so many different climates and so many different cultures and so many hidden gems that are overlooked by people because they just don't think about it, or they think about things that are scaring them. I'm part of it too. I'm not going to lie, but that intimidation does pick up. So for example, now I'm married, I will think about, what are some places that I can go with my wife? And oftentimes the language barrier is an issue, or the safety barrier, or, just kind of breaking the ice. It gives you cold feet sometimes. There's a lot of, I think, intimidation that people sometimes face when thinking about traveling to some of these countries. Once I land at the airport, kahan pe jaunga, do they speak English over there? How do I get around? Should I take the taxi? Should I, things like that.
There's nothing like that. They've invested a lot in the tourism sector, and you'll get a really good service if you come to Malawi or Zimbabwe. I remember I landed in Zimbabwe from Johannesburg. I was coming back from university, and I met this guy who was from Boston. And I asked him, what are you doing here? And he says, dude, I've had enough of Europe. I've had enough of all those other countries. Africa is the place to see. So I started off in Cape Town, and I'm going all the way to Central Africa. I was really impressed. So, and he was alone, it was just him with his backpack.
White guy?
Yeah, he was a white guy, and he was fearless, Wow. And when he did land, okay, I get it. White people do take a lot of risks, and that's admirable. But I think we should do the same now. I think it's high time that we go and discover places. So with Zimbabwe and Malawi, there is no need to fear anything. Yeah, you will find people who speak English, speak very good English, very educated people, and they will help you out. They'll provide you a good service. And it's not like, koi aapko trick karke aapke paise kha jayega and stuff. That happens everywhere in the world, okay? If you land in Pakistan, it can happen to you in Pakistan. If you land anywhere else in the world, even in Gulf countries, that's everywhere in the world. So it's a bit unfair to put that on Africa. But chori wagera ho jayegi, it's not like that. Nah, it's a very, very nice place, especially if you want to see the world, if you want to see some amazing places. Zimbabwe, Malawi, South Africa, Mozambique, these are really, really good places to check out.
Food की थोड़ी बात करो वैसे. वहाँ पे क्या खा रहे थे? घर पे ज्यादा मतलब देसी खाना ही पकता होगा, राइट?
हाँ, घर पे सारा का सारा देसी खाना पकता है और इवन जब मैं यूनिवर्सिटी गया so
Yeah.
okay in the beginning I was getting my food from this local South African Indian lady, very nice lady, and she used to cook food for me, and they make food a little bit different, के मसाले अलग होते हैं हमसे, they're not
Yeah.
exactly like Pakistani food. And then second year my brother and my cousin joined me, so we started making food on our own, and I used to speak to my mom and learn from her on video call, and then I started making nihari, korma and all these things. तो हम लोग खाना तो अभी तक देसी ही खाते हैं.
अच्छा, वहाँ पे देसी ज़्यादा खाना जाता है. What do the locals eat in general in Zimbabwe and Malawi?
Okay, in Zimbabwe and Malawi, the staple food is maize. So they make this thing called, in Zimbabwe it's called sadza, in Malawi it's called nsima, and it's basically carbs, and a lot of carbs.
Sadza, S-A-D-Z-A.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
I'm
it's
looking it up
really
right now.
nice.
Is it like rice?
Sort of, but like, you know, okay,
Yeah.
you know what suji is, right? Suji.
Yeah, right, I see.
Yeah, so it's sort of like that.
Yeah, I see it right now.
If you Google it, you'll see pictures. It's this.
Yep, I'm looking at pictures of it.
Yeah, and it's
I
a lot
see.
of carbs, and it tastes amazing. And they have it all over Africa, like South Africa, Malawi, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, all these places.
So they mix that with curries and stuff, and then yeah, that's what they eat.
You can have this with veggies, with curry, with beans, with meat. You can have this with everything, and we even eat this in our houses. It's so good.
I see. Really? Okay. Yeah, looks interesting. Yeah, I see it pretty much mixed with every vegetable, every meat over here.
Yeah, and then there's this braai culture. Okay, okay. So you in America they call it a barbecue. We call it a braai in Zimbabwe, Malawi, South Africa. Yeah. So that's like something that's really big in Southern Africa, especially braais, and they happen at people's houses almost every weekend. What you could call a cookout. That's a big deal over there, especially in South Africa. It's huge.
I asked Bilal about the flying experience from Africa to Pakistan. As expected, it's not a direct flight. His last experience was from Malawi to Nairobi, Kenya, about 4 hours. And then from there...
And then from Nairobi to Dubai, we took another like 4 to 5 hours, I think. And then from Dubai to Karachi, it's I think an hour and a half.
So there's a few layovers in between.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Dubai, it's a long stay. Especially if you're 18 hours. I don't like Dubai airport. People make a big deal out of it, but I just...
Yeah, I mean, airport ही होता है. No matter how comfortable they make it, you're just trying to get to your destination.
You just want to get to your destination. I'm very, very uncomfortable at airports. अच्छा और वापस आना भी एक struggle है, you know. Okay, we went a lot of school and stuff, but one of the issues that we as Pakistani people face is that इतनी shopping कर ली कि अब बैग सारे भर गए, अब सामान कैसे लेकर जाए वापस?
वापस कैसे जाने? Yeah.
That is, right. I think I've never ever seen anybody but Pakistani people at airports struggling with their baggage. यार ये कहाँ रखना है, ये सामान ये वाले बैग में रख दो. अच्छा ये दो मसले, एक तो सामान बैग में रखने का और एयरपोर्ट टाइम पे पहुंचने का. You know, हम सब बातें करते हैं एज पाकिस्तानी पीपल कि सुबह को जल्दी उठ जाना है और एयरपोर्ट टाइम पे पहुंचना है, और पहुंचते वही गेट बंद होने से 10 मिनट पहले और सब भाग रहे होंगे. And
yeah,
okay,
exactly.
a lot of people find this embarrassing, but I've come to terms with it कि हम ऐसे ही हैं. Okay, and even if I do see like, because you know I'm usually traveling alone. वही पढ़ाई के लिए जा रहा हूँ या कहीं, तो मेरा इतना फैमिली के साथ ट्रैवल होता नहीं है. But I do see a lot of Pakistani families when I've come to terms with it कि यार ये हमारे लोग हैं, हम सब ऐसे ही हैं, nothing to laugh at, this is how it is, it's fine. So I just give them like a polite smile.
It's a cultural thing, and I think most people at the airports know this by now.
Yeah, ये हमारा तरीका है, please आप mind ना करें.
Now, yeah, for example, like यहाँ पे going to Pakistan from the US, they have a baggage. I think you can take 2 to 3 bags. Right. So we'll limit her, and then each bag can weigh no more than 70 pounds, which is about 32 kilograms, right? So 32 kilograms is zyada nahi karna. Now, Ami, my mom, and basically any uncle or auntie that's going to Pakistan from here, they make sure that they stuff it as much as possible to the 32 kilogram limit. बल्कि वो 32 की 33 कर देंगे. They'll go to 33, and then they'll say कि वो माफ कर देगा, कोई नहीं, you know, वो they'll just let us go. फिर क्या होता है, कुछ लोग वाकई छोड़ देते हैं, कुछ लोग they don't tell us anything at the airport. Other times they stop you and they're like, no, you gotta take out something or throw something out, otherwise we can't let you go. फिर वहाँ पे in the middle of the airport we have our bags opened up, our luggage opened up, and we're trying to figure out what to do.
अच्छा ये जरूरी नहीं है, ये रख लो वापस.
Yeah. तो अम्मी ने हमें स्यापा डाला होता है. हम हम 2-3 भाई जाते हैं अम्मी को छोड़ने के लिए. हम पाकिस्तान जा नहीं रहे होते, लेकिन पसीने हमारे निकले होते हैं.
पसीने हमारे भी निकल रहे होते हैं. It's something that's very normal now. I've come to terms with it. This is how we are as Pakistani people, and it's fine. It's totally fine. People have different quirks in their like with their cultures, and this is us. We do this. We have issues at the airport, okay? And please just deal with it.
It's funny you say this because when I was getting married about 2 years ago, meri shaadi hui, right? 2.5 years ago now, I invited my boss to my wedding, and my boss is white. So I told him straight up, I think the wedding was, the walima was scheduled for 6 p.m.
Right.
And I told him, hey, his name was Eric. So I was like, hey, Eric, listen, in Pakistani culture, nobody actually shows up on time. So I don't want you to come and just sit there, right? I don't want you to be just sitting there and bored. So come with your wife and, with your kids, come at 8 p.m. Come 2 hours later, because pretty much everybody will show up 2 hours later. He showed up 1 hour later, and he still waited 1 more hour for other people to show up, for pretty much all of our guests to get together and for us to start the function. And he was telling me later on, he was like, I was extremely uncomfortable showing up 1 hour late. And you told me to come 2 hours late, but I still came 1 hour late. And yet you were absolutely right. Nobody actually showed up. I was like, yeah, don't mind it. This is just how we do things. When we schedule it, we are always fashionably late. We never show up. We intentionally do not show up on time. That's just how we are.
We call it Pakistan Standard Time.
Yeah, exactly. Ab hisab lagao aaj ki podcast. We scheduled it for 7 p.m. your time, and we did it exactly 2 hours late because of me. So no matter how American I get, I still follow Desi schedule.
Pakistan time. No, but thank God for that, because I was actually having lunch when you called me.
Yeah. किसी का कुछ होना ही था, you know. If it wasn't me, it would have been you.
Something would have come up. Yeah. I actually thought that when you would call, some mehman would show up. You know that, because that can happen in Pakistan.
Yeah. That happens. Yeah. Yeah. Where do you want to settle down, I would ask?
Yes, I really don't know that. I want to go back to Zimbabwe. I also want to live in Malawi. I'm still looking for home. I think for me, home is obviously where my parents are. So when they're sure about where to go, then obviously I'll just follow them around. Plans तो बहुत सारे plans हैं. लेकिन दरअसल मैंने planning को थोड़ी सी कम कर दी, क्योंकि जो मैं plans करता हूँ वो सारे उल्टे हो जाते हैं. So for now, the only plan is that inshallah by next year I'll graduate. I'll be done with my graduation. I'm doing accounting right now, and after 3 years of work experience, inshallah I'll be a chartered accountant. तो CA बनने का ख्वाब था, वो बन जाऊंगा इंशाल्लाह अगले साल तक. उसके बाद काम शुरू, and then I'll see where my life takes me. क्योंकि अभी तो बहुत कुछ करना है. अभी तो शादी की भी तलवार सर पे लटकी हुई है, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I was going to ask you about that. शादी का plan क्या है?
शादी का plan, for me, it's very traditional thing. It's an arranged marriage. My mom will find somebody who she thinks that I should get married to, and then I'll say yes to that when the time comes. So abhi to फिलहाल ऐसा कोई scene है नहीं. In my family, most of our marriages are arranged, and I'm totally okay with that.
Yeah, that's amazing, because आजकल बहुत कम हो गए arranged. कई लोग semi-arranged marriage करते हैं. So for example, their parents still find them somebody, but they spend a little bit of time talking to each other and making sure that they're compatible, and then they do that. लेकिन fully arranged marriage आजकल काफी rare हो गया. So that's pretty impressive. Something you're open to.
Arranged marriage is great, yeah. लेकिन पसंद होनी चाहिए. If your parents suggest somebody to you and you don't like that person, okay, you really shouldn't say yes. I know that I'm not married, and I shouldn't be I'm not somebody who can comment on this, but I personally feel like if I don't like somebody that my parents suggested to me, I can say no, and my parents will understand. Most parents will understand कि यार सारी जिंदगी गुजारनी है. अगर वो मना कर रहा है ना, तो कोई वजह होगी उसकी. Definitely, you've got the right to say no. Use that right. If you don't like somebody, if you feel like चलो ये जो पसंद है, जो parents ने suggest की है लड़के को या लड़की को, he or she must say yes कि यार चलो पसंद है, इसलिए मैं हाँ कर रही हूँ या कर रहा हूँ. But अगर पसंद नहीं है, you feel uncomfortable, don't go for it.
There was a different time, before us. For example, my mom and dad, the way my mom said she got married was she just found out that she got engaged. She didn't even know she was getting engaged. तो वो ज़माना भी अलग था ना?
वो ज़माना अलग था.
And they were okay with it, right? A lot of people are successfully, happily married for 40, 50 plus years.
Yeah.
And their life story is just like that. Their life story is just like, I didn't even see him until the day of the wedding, or I saw him maybe a day before. So my mom says she saw my dad only once before the wedding. And that too from a distance. ये नहीं कि कोई बात वगैरह हुई. वो बहुत दूर से देख लिया. And that's it. उसके अलावा pictures देखनी, that's it. शादी हो गई. 6 kids later, and I think they've been married 45 years now. So it's
Mashallah.
Yeah, mashallah. So it's been तो ऐसा होता है. लेकिन आजकल के ज़माने में you can't even imagine कि यार देखे बगैर कैसे हाँ कर सकता है बंदा, या
It's really complicated आज के ज़माने में, but inshallah I think the way our Pakistani marriages are, they work out pretty well. Especially if both the guy and the girl are both Pakistani, and they usually work out pretty well because the way we're brought up, if you've got like proper Desi parents, so the way our guys and our girls are brought up, alhamdulillah, it's pretty good. और यहाँ भाई ये बात तो है कि यार कुछ लड़के खराब होते हैं, it's true. Some guys are bad, they do really stupid things. मगर उसमें पाकिस्तानी होने का फॉल्ट नहीं है, ना कल्चर की गलती है उसमें. हाँ ये हो सकता है कि यार he had bad company or something, इसलिए वो खराब हो गया, उसने कोई ऐसी हरकत कर दी. It's not about Pakistan, it's not Pakistan's fault in that. हमारे भी बहुत सारे ऐसे इंसिडेंट्स हुए हैं मलावी के, यार पाकिस्तानी लड़के ने कोई कोई झगड़ा हो गया, कोई गलत काम कर दिया उसने पब्लिक में, तो कहते हैं यार ये सारे पाकिस्तानी ऐसे हैं. नहीं यार, आप पाकिस्तानी के बारे में बात नहीं करो, हर कम्युनिटी में बुरे लोग और अच्छे लोग होते हैं.
Yeah, वहाँ पे are there a lot of intercultural marriages? Like पाकिस्तानी बाहर शादी करते हैं?
हाँ करते हैं, बहुत से लोग करते हैं, अलग कल्चर्स में, इवन इन अलग रेसेस में करते हैं. I've seen people get like interracial marriages and intercultural marriages. Yes, they do happen quite a lot.
Or in general, वैसे going back to arranged marriage, culturally speaking, at least हमारे marriage process में obviously the parents are involved, which is something that's not very common in Western lifestyles, right? People are more individualistic. Like मैंने पसंद करनी है.
Yeah.
I know who I want to live with, and my parents or your parents have nothing to do with it. However, I think for us it's actually beneficial in that aspect because we are naturally very family-oriented people. So it's actually a good thing that our parents are somewhat involved in the process. My parents were involved, for example, in my wedding rishta process, right? And I personally, I didn't really mind it. And her parents were involved too. I think it's actually a good thing because that way, क्योंकि families ने आपस में मिलना जुलना लाजमी होता है. It's not like वो अपनी family से नहीं मिलेगी शादी के बाद, या आप अपनी family के साथ नहीं मिलोगे. So ये mixing होती रहेगी, ये interactions होती रहेंगी. So it's actually very important that both families get along, not just the two people.
Yeah, it is. And it's not just with weddings and with rishtas. I think our families are always involved in whatever we do. My roommate in South Africa was also Pakistani. I was very, very lucky to find a Pakistani roommate. And we were just talking one day, and I said to him that, bro, हम कहीं भी जाते हैं ना दुनिया में, we're not alone. Like our families are, I don't know how to put this, I guess spiritually or just like mentally they're there with us. So whatever we do, whatever step we take, we're always thinking about the family. What will they think? And that's really cool. In that way, you'll never feel alone.
Yeah, exactly right. And nobody's cracked the secret code. You already kind of mentioned that. Over here, for example, the style of marriages are different. It's more love marriages, but yet the divorce rates are so high.
So high.
Yeah, so it's not like they've cracked any secret code के ये आपने try कर लिया, try before you buy, तो उसके साथ better experience होती है. It's actually not proven that way either. So
it's not. It's really not. I think arranged is a really, really good concept. I really don't mind that. I'm looking forward to it, I can say.
That's great. Yeah. Well, how old did you say you were again?
24.
24. Okay. Yeah. So it's coming. It's definitely coming. So you can look forward to it.
But after I'm done with my studies, my mom has given me this much time. I've spoken to them about this in detail, and they said, okay, yeah, we'll give you enough time to finish your studies and to start a job. That way, you'll feel like you're financially stable. And then we'll get you hitched. That's the term that I use. It's cool.
Yeah. Get you hitched.
Getting hitched. Yeah. So they'll get me hitched somewhere, and I think that's where my life will actually start. I feel like it hasn't started yet. I'm still preparing for the main event.
Yeah, it's a new chapter. Once you get married,
it'll be a new chapter, and that's like the one chapter where I'll be on the same wavelength as others, because I've always been somebody who's played catch up in my life. I've always been behind a lot. I've missed like 5 years of school in my life, and then I had to start like catching up to all that. So I think that'll be like one chapter of my life that I'll start on the same wavelength as with my peer. Yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah. That's good.
This has been amazing, man. I just want to say thank you so much for having me on here. And what I'd like to say about this whole podcast thing is, when I found out about you guys, it made me so happy that there's actually a platform for Pakistani people to communicate with each other. I wish I had this during my high school time. That if I had this when I was in high school, when I was a teenager, it would be really helpful to me. So I just want to put this out there. I just want to request to people, if you're Pakistani, if you identify yourself as a brown person, as a Pakistani, and you see a fellow Pakistani, please be very, very nice to them, especially if they're new, if they've just moved to that place. It can be a bit of a struggle for them, so please be nice. I've had one policy. that I used to teach tuitions before, and just like that. So if I'm teaching somebody who's Pakistani, I never charge them. Yeah, so please be good to your people. They're a part of you, okay? You owe it to them.
Right.
And thank you so much for having me on here, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for coming. Wonderful message, by the way. I mean, I think people need to know, okay, people are willing to open up to you, especially Pakistanis. Do Pakistani ka hai na, and they don't know each other, and they meet up. And as long as you're willing to open up to the other person, they'll probably become your best friend if you allow them to. Like in kahin log, they don't do that. They don't allow it. But otherwise, you know, two Pakistanis in the middle of nowhere can become best friends.
For real, yaar, jitna fayda hame Pakistan ne pahunchaya hai, we can't even count it. I mean, you and I wouldn't be talking right now if it wasn't for Pakistan. The reason why we're speaking right now because we're Pakistanis, we're overseas Pakistanis, isn't? So this is like the ehsan of Pakistan on us, and we should really think about this, be grateful for this, say Alhamdulillah for this every single day at least. यार अल्लाह का शुक्र है कि हम पाकिस्तानी हैं, पाकिस्तान में पैदा हुए, या हमारे पेरेंट्स पाकिस्तान में पैदा हुए, हमें ये इतना अमेजिंग कल्चर मिला, इतनी अमेजिंग ज़बानें मिली. You know, I really love Punjabi. I love how Punjabi sounds. It's so cool.
Yeah.
Especially jokes in Punjabi, यार. मतलब पंजाबी में जो जुगते होती हैं, you don't get stuff like that. That's priceless. So we really need to be more grateful for this.
Absolutely, you're right.
We need to be more grateful.
All right, thanks for that.
Thank you so much, man.
Yeah.
All right, bro.
Okay.
Take care.
Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.